All right. All right. All right. This week we will be talking about the 2009 film District 9. And joining me, I have Leftist Libby, Nat, and Ryan. Nat and Ryan each have their own podcast. So sorry, Libby, you don't have a podcast, but that's okay. If you both want to just quickly let everyone know what.
I'm enough without a podcast. It's okay.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Oh, go ahead,
Ryan, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. I do the Conscious Environment Podcast. It's on everywhere that you can think of a podcast being on. I talk about it's an anti-racism podcast, so talk about a lot of different social issues, but from the perspective of different topics. So we've talked about undocumented immigrants. I'm actually this upcoming week, so I'll say the date, February 16th. The episode we're recording an episode about AAVE and whether or not it's like a language, what the difference is, and explain it. So I'm gonna have a linguist on, and we're gonna talk about that. But
Awesome.
yeah, that's it's a weekly show. It's cool.
Let's talk about that after we're done recording, because that's like right up my alley.
Sweet.
I love that stuff. And I'm Nat. I am the writer and producer of Collective Action Comics. I just do history and politics through the lens of comic books that were produced at the time. And currently I'm working on Mark Miller's The Ultimates, which was the blueprint ostensibly for the MCU. And it's like right at that perfect psychotic nexus after we'd invaded Afghanistan, but while they were propagandizing us to invade Iraq. And it's part of the like feedback loop where it's like responding to the propaganda and then adding to the unholy chorus that was the propaganda.
Awesome. Well, actually, it sounds like both of these are like relevant, very relevant indeed for even this movie. Actually, you mentioned Ryan immigration or that you've had topics like that, and the other pieces to it. So, as far as this movie goes, I have seen this movie a bunch of times, and I feel like every time I watch it, it makes me feel somewhat uncomfortable, but like in a good way of watching it. I don't know if anyone has that feeling about it. I think it's like the kind of style, the like found footage is such a cool avenue for a movie in general. And so I don't know if anyone else shares that discomfort.
It keeps holding up, like it's been over a decade now. It's still there. It's still holding up. And it's just, you can draw a line from every point in the movie to the apartheid, like everything in South Africa. And I can't wait to dig into that and really unpack all that.
The body horror gets me every time. Not to jump too far into it, but when he pulls his nail off, that it's I don't know what it is. I'm just like
horrifying.
squeamish about like finger stuff or hand stuff, like, and it's literally that's the whole movie is like it's his arm, and I'm just like awful.
So like I'm a tattoo artist, and like the rinse cups when you're using like black ink, every single if I drink it, I'll become one. Like I just if I drink the ink water, I'm gonna become one.
Jeez.
I'm gonna be a pros.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
It's awful, yeah. Just like the movie. Yep.
Yeah, I agree with you about the body horror. It's one of the most disturbing aspects, aside from the plot itself. It's yeah.
Good Lord, that's a level that I had not connected to it on viscerally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we can. I feel like I think I was mentioning like how they use like the found footage kind of style and back and forth in terms of, the where it is in the kind of taking you back towards the end, and then back towards the beginning. But the beginning, since I think we should talk about the apartheid maybe first as kind of the parallel throughout the movie. So I don't know if anyone has any specific sort of thoughts about. I mean, I think when the movie came out, for me, I was aware of the politics around it before I'd seen it. So it was one of those things, but I couldn't even imagine going into it without any knowledge, and then just it's impossible to, like you said, Libby, like the entire movie is that thread.
Yeah, so
Right.
if you look at the date of when the ship first gets in there, it's like 1982, and
Mhm.
that's right when sort of the Nelson Mandela phase began, like the phase of the apartheid in South Africa, of like when he was jailed and all the other revolutionaries that went along with him in order for other countries to pick up the embargoes and stuff that really brought an end to the apartheid. And this movie was just like a cut and paste. So they cut the entire Nelson Mandela stuff out and just pasted in these aliens living there. And one thing that after going back and learning more about the apartheid is the levels that they had, the discrimination against the different types of people, that it was really like how they called him a half breed, where like they had like there was like the the black people, they had Indian people, they had mixed race people, and like white people, and they were all on different levels and viewed different legally, the same as they were like, well, they're half breeds, or they had I don't know that like that was just one of many lines I could draw from the South African history at the time and this movie. I don't know if anybody else saw those things in there.
One of the first
Absolutely,
things,
the 1982 stuck out with me for sure.
yeah, I noticed the
Like
date right away
the date was
on
there.
this watch. I noticed the date,
Mhm.
and I was thinking about like when the movie came out, and there's kind of an interesting thing that we could talk about, like what American politics was doing at the time that made you see this movie through a whole different lens, because we were dealing with strangers coming from somewhere else to harm us, and like we kind of had that idea like in the American zeitgeist. Not that any of it was true or real, but that's what they were telling us. And then this movie comes along, and there's literal aliens that are seeking refuge in a strange land. And so I think a lot of American audiences at the time put that on it, but yeah,
Yeah, like
right.
the
Is it a
time
decade?
when they were not to get to the end of the movie or whatever, but they literally said, oh, it's terrorist attacks, when they were trying to get into the MNU building using the weapons that they had stolen from the oh, I forget the name of the like the black guy in the wheelchair. I can't remember.
I can't remember his name,
It
but
was like,
the Nigerians. I
yeah,
have
Yeah.
we'll
They,
Oh,
get
I
there,
have
but
thoughts on
I have
that.
so many thoughts. I
yes,
have so many thoughts
Oh,
about who
you
the
mean the
bad guys
Nigerians
are.
painted with the
right,
broadest brush ever?
yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And
Oh boy,
way
just
way that they
evil black people.
Ugh.
well, and
Oh
the way
man, I
that
couldn't do it.
the MNU were like, don't even look at him, don't even look at him. That it was like, we're just pretending that's not happening. We're not even, they weren't even doing anything about the treatment of the I don't know what else to call them but prawn. They said it was a slur, but like we're not, so like we're not
Yeah.
But
supposed
we're
to
not
call
given
them
the
prawn.
real name. That's
They
one of
don't.
the
Yeah, you
things.
don't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
get
they
it.
don't have one.
Yeah.
I wrote in my notes just alien because as soon as I wrote down prawn as a slur, I was like, "Ah, well, now I
No,
don't know
Shit.
what to call them.
but then
So I was
it's
like,
also
well, the aliens in the movie.
yeah, yeah.
I think it's fair
Mm.
to refer to them as that. I mean, I get that it is a slur. I mean, we could say aliens if it's, as
Yeah,
a
it's just they're the aliens.
the aliens.
Yeah.
They were so human.
They were
Yeah.
certainly more human than the people that were hunting them, if we're
Yeah.
being honest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think the movie tried to go out of its way to portray them as such. Now, whether it was successful or not is sort of a different subject, but it's
I
clear that
think
they did
so.
try.
I think so. I think
I
that
think so too, but there are
they're with
parts where
it.
it was a little strange.
the main character Wickus, he found his humanity in becoming one of them. Like he was totally a fascist, totally like dehumanizing any of them. Like, oh, they signed this paper. He knew all the entire time that he was sending them to a concentration camp. He admitted that later as he found his humanity. So I think it was very successful in showing the humanity and showing that they were just like us.
I think it was successful too. I think there were parts where I think it could have been a little more direct, but we can get into that later. But one of the things that you brought up, Libby, that I think I would like to expand on too, that I think is a really interesting part of this movie, is that, like, one of the questions I had is, would Vickus have continued with his role in this system had he not been exposed to the fluid, had he not been changed? And of course, the answer is yes, right? So I actually have a bunch of complaints about this movie, as much as I enjoyed it, right? But like, one of the questions that I think was the most interesting that it brought up to me was, or not questions, but one of the ideas that it posed was how systemic inertia is so powerful. Because this man who has these ideas changed and warped by his own personal experiences, it's very clear, would have continued down the path of evil had it not affected him personally.
Yeah, well, so one question I have about that though is so he got his position through nepotism, right? So it was like his father-in-law that put him there. Did the father-in-law put him there because he liked him, or because he hated him? Did he put him there to fail? You know, like, so would he have? I don't know, because I don't know if that position was necessarily appropriate for him.
I don't think he put him there to fail, because at the celebration he's pissed off at him. The father comes up and he shakes him. I full disclosure, guys, right before I walked into my studio, I hit stop on the movie. The credits rolled and I ran up here.
I watched it yesterday.
Very, 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 very fresh. He was like, he's pissed off at him. He's cursing him out. Like, you better not mess this up for me. Like, I got a lot riding on this. What happened out there today? Like, they were not happy with. Oh, and that was the other thing that I thought was really interesting too. So, like, they're sending them to concentration camps, and they know the bad place that they're going to end up going. But but he said to him, too many of them died out there. But then you see, like, well, it's almost like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
Yeah. Well, then it said the population was 2.5 million and growing. But one thing about the party, when he walked in and said, I may have crapped myself a little, and everybody goes, surprise!
It's so good.
He crapped himself. Like, do you think it was just a little bit more, or do you think it was just like, okay, it's over?
There's definitely poop in his pants when he fell down. Can we talk about the fact that this clearly sick man was cutting that cake? I wouldn't have let him near anything that was food. I'm like, he's sick. Someone go let him lie down.
But well, I do have another question though about the putting him in that position to fail and all that. Excuse me. You have to ask yourself too, like, does that actually matter? Because if he had failed in that position, does that change, or would that have changed his personal opinions on the aliens? Whether he had power to do anything about it would have changed, since he might not have been in that position in the government anymore, or in MNU.
I mean, he did seem to have like some empathy. Right. That's too far. Maybe not empathy. He did have some. Maybe it was like it did seem like they tried to make him have like a connection to them, or like he had this innate ability to like communicate with them in some way that others didn't have. Right? Yeah, wasn't that a little weird?
It just felt like he was a career man.
When they first got there, right? The guys all were like ready to shoot. He's like, no, don't shoot. And he starts hucking the cat food at them. And they're like, is that tear gas? Like, no, it's cat food. They really like it. So like he did have like a fundamental good attributes to him, even
I agree.
before
Which I think speaks to the systemic evil. Because he's doing evil things even when he has opinions that are even marginally better than his coworkers.
But he's shown to be such a selfish person.
He really
literally
is.
Till almost the last scene of the movie. I was waiting for some kind of, like, I forgot if there was some sort of redemption arc, and there really isn't. Like, everything he does till his last act is in his best interest. It is still in his best interest to get Christopher Johnson. I can't believe his name is Christopher Johnson.
Yeah.
To get him off the planet, because the only way that he can be turned back human, and he doesn't know how long it's, sure, it takes 3 years, but I don't know, 3 years he turns back into a human, fine, or whatever, it helped save these people, but that's still his best option. It's either that or get shot to death. So he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go do that one. But that was the whole movie. Like, he's a jerk the whole time.
The sequel's gonna be where they're gonna take his character from there.
Well, it's supposed to be in the based on around the United States, apparently, is like the
oh really so we're not going to hear about what happened over there anymore?
I don't think so. I think it's completely like an unrelated sequel, supposedly.
That'd be interesting. I was really kind of hoping for a District 10, just to see.
Well, I think it's still supposed to be called District 10, but I don't understand how it could not be about this thing. But let me. I have another question, since you brought up sort of his arc at the end, which I also felt that way. Like, he found excuse after excuse to not really help them. He was only doing things selfishly. And maybe this is like jumping ahead to something that we talked about the movie, some of the characters, but how do you see it? I mean, it's pretty easy to see this movie a lot like, I feel like, Elysium, the director's other movie, also like Avatar, James Cameron, who also helped finance produce this movie, as just a straight white savior arc. And that was like one of the first questions on my list that I was going to say. I kind of skipped the first one or we'll go back to, I think. But does that what you just said, Ryan, about how he like is unredeemable and he's completely selfish until the very last ending of this movie, does that jive with that being? Do you still see it? And I guess so. Let me ask one more part. It's also not like a happy ending. He doesn't get a happy ending. He still becomes an alien for good. Only 2 of the aliens actually leave. All the rest of their compatriots are left behind. It's not a happy ending. So is it still, would you still then say that it's like a white savior type of arc for him?
I think it has that air to it, but I don't think it sticks the landing, if that's what they were trying to do. I had two thoughts on this. One, my initial thought was, this is an allegory for apartheid, and you guys had it within you to make the hero a white guy. Like, and it's such a clear allegory for it. Like, it's absolutely, if you know anything about apartheid, even on accident, you could pick up like where they're talking about it with this movie. So to have the character be the main character be a white man that saves them, and literally no South Africans in the movie. Like, we see them in the beginning during the riots, and then it's like there's no Black South Africans at all, even though District 9 is supposed to be right next to a township that's outside of Johannesburg, so there'd be Black people everywhere. But
not to correct you in that, but there was one, I think, important role that there was a Black South African man who he was awaiting imprisonment for blowing the whistle on the and showing all the data that they knew everything all along, and was able to sort of, and maybe it does actually reinforce this, but it sort of gives Wickus the pass, like that he wasn't this bad guy that they made him out to be. Like, they cleared his name, so they make him into the good guy even more so.
And I think that falls into like the white savior trope there too. But I guess my point was, like, the characters that we follow, if we see black people, they're bad guys.
Yeah.
Except for that one guy that we saw. It's really only some of the first act like that we see that character. After that initial raid, that character is gone until the end of the movie when he comes back, when they do the bookend with the documentary style view of it. So my initial thought was like, that's kind of crappy. But then as I got to the end of the movie, I'm like, but he's still a bad guy, right? Like, this isn't a happy movie. The movie is pretty cynical. Like, the movie is it's not like a completely sad movie or anything like that, but like the movie's pretty cynical about just like, even if he did the right thing, it isn't good. Like, he let them all he did was not get in the way. Like, he helped, but he also brought the problem. So he solved somewhat a problem that he created in the first place, and all they want to do is leave. That's the thing that they want to do, is leave. And that's why I want to see District 10 following this story, because I want to know why they're even there and why they want to leave. Like, I want that story. That's the movie I want to watch. The alien should have been the main character.
I want to hear what the country song would be about Wickus. Like, he's like, oh, I turned into an alien, and then I couldn't have a girlfriend, and then I made her little metal roses. Like,
Hank Williams
and
V.
I drank that black tattoo liquid.
there is one other like speaking role of a black person, like a black South African, back when, so the way I view this movie, I think it's actually like two movies like kind of shoved into one, right? There's the first one that's like sort of a thoughtful meditation on apartheid, and there's the second one which is just sort of like a moderately intelligent mech action movie, right? And but in the first half, like right at the beginning, we have that woman who's the like a black woman who's being interviewed, and she initially says what sounds like, and I think this sort of characterizes almost the whole movie, right? I think the movie is quite liberal. Like, it's a very liberal movie. Like, it brings up good points, but it doesn't offer any kind of prescriptions beyond liberalism, right? And she says, well, we're spending so much money, and I'm not that happy about that, on like these aliens, right? And then that sounds like almost reasonable, the way she frames it, not the way I just said it, but the way that she says it in the actual quote. But then she follows that up but at least we're keeping them separate, which means that, again, they have a black speaking part that is not a good person. So they definitely falls more into sort of a white savior-y trope.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. Like, as we're discussing this, I'm realizing it more and more. We follow from the perspective of, almost in any other movie, Wickus is the antagonist the whole time, and we would be following the alien. And I think that's where they didn't stick the landing. I think that's where it feels like, is this a white savior movie? Because he's our main character, and he really shouldn't be. He should be a side character, and our main character that we follow should be the alien. And he should be a side character that speaks English for us. And that's all he's there for.
Yeah, to be our avatar for the audience.
Yeah.
Right, but instead he's positioned as the hero, but nobody wants to be in his shoes because he's awful. Like, so it's really hard to relate with him.
He's a very unlikely main character in a movie, and I feel like in general, I feel like it's not the typical type of lead trope you'd get. And it's the thing you mentioned that was interesting is that you talked about it being liberal, and one of the questions I had on my sheet was relating to liberal, and I think it also plays. We didn't really talk about the MNU, which is sort of like the peacekeeping military organization, humanitarian stand-in for, like, NATO, Lockheed Martin, NATO, whatever you want to call it. And so, well, here's sort of like my thought and question, and maybe this comes into play too, is. So they don't really give any sense of what to do other than to move them to another place that's slightly better than the place they are, that will just be what they refer to literally as a concentration camp.
Well,
Or
so
Better.
what they talked about. So um try to see what are they gaining from having them around, right? And that was their weaponry. That's all that they wanted from them.
yeah,
That was a big part of the
exactly.
movie. And this is separate, but I wanted to talk about that trailer abortion that they did, where it was like popcorn, and he's like,
Oh
"Oh,
yeah.
he's like
Ugh.
pulls a soda can out of there, and he's like, check it out, you want to do it too?" And during that whole part, it was like he was so reckless and just so hyper about everything. He deserved to breathe that can of like that needed to happen to that character, or to his character. But I thought the way that they were so, you said it was like a good mech movie, and the way that the aliens were so intertwined with technology and with mechanicals, that I I just can't wait to see more and more. I wanted to see more on the ship. I wanted to see, okay, how did they make the babies in the trailer? Like that, like a trailer abortion with fire was just like something. And like they're like, it's like popcorn, and it really brought me back to like in Futurama when they were eating, I don't know if you, maybe
Oh
this
yeah.
is too
I know
deep in
exactly what you're
Futurama,
talking about.
when they were like eating
they thought they were
alien
chicken
babies.
nuggets or something.
Yeah. Poplars.
I
Oh
really
yeah, and they found out that they're
down
like
that
eggs and they were alive.
I could literally sing the entire song from that episode right now, but I'll spare all of you.
Well, so it's interesting you brought up that part too, and I think the thing about the technology at MNU is, you're completely right, is that what they want is, they're conducting tests to create someone that Wickus was the thing that they wanted, and they got by accident, right? It was an accident that he inhales the canister, and then they can use him for their tests. And his father-in-law shows his true colors when they're like, yeah, just cut him open and take his organs and everything like that.
Right.
But so, oh god, what was the thing I was going to ask about it? Oh, and so this organization, the MNU, is like the stand-in, and I think, I don't remember who mentioned it too, is there's no mention of the South African, because there's no, or even the white South African government is just completely absent in this movie, and you're shown MNU as it's different from like when they arrive in 82 until the present time. I think that's when the creation of MNU occurs, to control them, right?
They said that MNU was the world's #2 weapons
Right.
dealers. It's
Exactly.
all about all that. All it is, it's all them just handling the weaponry, and it must be the reason that they're stepping over or stepping on the feet of the South African government, is for the weapons,
They buy them off.
weapons, and the way that they can they keep them around to do the experiments to figure out their next set of ammunition, whatever, however their gun trades work for them. That's
Yeah.
my theory in the thing.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if MNU is supposed to be like mercenaries or something. Like at the beginning, I wrote down, I was like, are they mercenaries? But then it seems like they're kind of like the foregone conclusion to a corporate entity just running amok, being so in charge of
like
something.
For-profit NATO is what it
Yeah,
seems
because
like.
when they show
Well,
them,
NATO's a for-profit. NATO.
Well,
right? when they show them doing the raid, or like doing the removal, whatever you want to call it, and they got all those white trucks, and they're going in, they're going into the district, and they're showing that. I thought it was like really interesting. I'm like, where is the government? Where is anybody? This is just like some guys. Who told them to go do this? Like, what? They didn't really establish that, like in the movie. You just assume, like, I mean, I guess they must have clearance from the government, or the government is so screwed up that like this company just runs it. But it's like they have the authority to do these things or tell them to do stuff. But I think it's interesting when they try to give the paperwork to Christopher Johnson, alien, And he reads it and he goes, "This isn't legal. You can't do this. I know my rights." And I was like, and I thought that was a great part because at that part, Vicus pretends that he can't understand him. Because for the rest of the movie and before that, he understands their language the whole time. And when he's saying, "This isn't legal, I'm not going to sign this," he turns to the other guys and it does like a bad translation. He's like, "Oh, maybe he's just kind of confused. Hold on, let me talk to him for a second." And then he tries to get down on his level and then just threatens him about his kids because he's a bad guy.
They use like every play out of the genocide playbook that they used to on these people, like the same as like, well, they control their reproduction. They're like, well, I'm just kicking you off of this land, you're going over here, we'll take your babies from you, you know, like they're just going right down the genocide playbook.
Well, one of the things, go ahead.
I just one thing I wanted to note because it's sticking out in my mind. They did there was a huge loss in, because I think the movie takes place over what, like a week, because they count the hours
like
for us.
70,
It's like
it's
72
74
hours.
hours.
3 days.
yeah, 74 hours or something by the end of that. They killed 300,000 of those aliens
Jesus.
because well, I guess we don't know how long it happens between the final shot of him and when they say that District 10 is completed, because the number that they give at District 10 is 2.5 million, but the number that they said in the beginning was 2.8 million, because I wrote down both numbers and I was like, wait a second.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they
shit.
lost 300,000 of them in this transfer. And in the fighting and the war and all that, and it's just kind of just hand waved over, just like a little tiny, just little detail, really clever kind of detail to show that like this was not a good thing that happened to these people.
I wonder how that when they say that the population is growing, though, I had a couple of questions because I don't know if you noticed, but in the beginning, they show the one of the aliens that was like really wanting the cat food. He's like, "Sign this paper, we'll give you the cat food." He had like a hat on, like a
with a
like
spinner.
the spinny thing, and it makes me wonder. They said this was the first time they ever transitioned a human over to an alien, but it makes me wonder, is that true? Like, how is this population growing? If they're stopping them from having babies, but they're saying that the population is growing, and then the way that they put the ... made me think that it might not necessarily be them reproducing, because they don't have they don't have, when they move them into these white tents, presumably they don't have the access to like any mechanical stuff to be putting the soda cans in the trailer to be putting their babies together in there. So I wonder how that population is growing. I wonder what's it growing to? Where's it coming from? I don't know. Did anybody? And also, when they were having like the little shrimpies fighting at the beginning and they were like betting on it, were those little shrimpies like babies, or were they like some other species?
Smaller.
Where were they coming from?
Yeah.
What, you know, what
Yeah,
was
they seemed like they were
hard to
like
tell.
dogs or something.
Yeah.
I think that that because this, okay, so I think it's an excellent question, Libby. Like, and I hadn't thought of it like that, and I'm really, really interested in that line of thinking. But so one of the, and I think that could be sort of intersected by what I was thinking when I was watching the movie, right? So one of my main complaints about the movie is that there is sort of there's absolutely no consistency in how it's produced or presented to us. Like, it starts off as found footage and it ends like it's not, like it's almost found footage, but in between it's not, right? And I think that has to do just in the real world with the fact that it was like a short movie that was then picked up by like a big production company. I think it was either Spielberg or Cameron. What was it?
Cameron, yeah.
Cameron, yeah, and said, "Oh, we're going to make this, right? But I've got some notes," right? So if you were to take it as being presented as found footage and just presented to us as in-universe propaganda, then to say that the population of the aliens is growing, it makes sense if it's actually not. And it's being presented to the other people, the humans in the universe, as if this population that is actually being decimated is growing because it's a threat, right? I mean, that's the same propaganda we see in the real world, right? We see it with like ethnic cleansing in China, or they talk about or to be crass about it, like black on black crime is increasing when we know it's like not, right? But it's this media being presented to us as if there were some sort of problem there that is not, right? It's hard to argue that is actually the case because the movie itself is so all over the place in how it's presented to us. But it's an interesting view to take.
I'm not sure if I'm willing to give up on the idea that the population is growing somehow. And that's because of the way that I forget the woman who was talking. She was very, a lot of the people who were talking in the documentary style at the end were very sympathetic to the aliens and very knowledgeable about what happened and very sympathetic to Wickus and everything. So I wonder if, because it was coming from that perspective, that information was being given to us, the audience. So I don't know but it would be really fun to see what's going to happen in District 10 to tell us. Maybe they'll address that there,
Yeah, it's hard to say either way, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, something to keep in mind too, in universe, there was a throwaway line that he had. Because I tried to write down or notice like everything that he said whenever he went into a shack, because he kept saying, like, you don't have a permit for this, you don't have a permit for that, which leads me to believe that like they do have someone has a permit for that, or like there's a system in place. And when he went into and saw the eggs, he was like, oh, there's no way that they have a permit for this. So does that mean that there are permits? And when he saw the kid, he said, did you get a permit for that to have him? And he said yes. So I almost assumed that they reproduce asexually at somehow, because we're never introduced to like another
like
mate
gender
creature for
we
him,
might have
right?
been. Remember, that was the person that Christopher saw on the table in the lab.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, possibly.
It's like ambiguous, but yeah, it could.
It is ambiguous.
Or I mean, because then right after that, his reason for I have to go back to my planet instead of helping you is I can't let this happen to my people, and that was after he saw the body on the table, or like he saw everything in that room, because he was like, what's going on here, and basically just stopped fighting because he was so taken aback.
Well, here's one other thing about the permit thing that made me think about it too, is when they're off on when he's promoted Wickus and he's going like door to door essentially to evict them, which is ridiculous. They don't, I mean, and I feel like they only did that because there was like humanitarian aid groups kind of watching them. It felt like they make it sound like, but I think that they had created a census for the aliens, and they knew who lived where. Like, I feel like they had a lot more information about their, I don't know, their District 9 than you're kind of led to believe, or that they share with you. So that makes me think they do know the population numbers. Perhaps they do know that some are allowed to prosper more than others, and maybe it's that.
It's really cool and rad of them to just be like, oh, don't look at them taking advantage, exploiting the aliens for cat food. Don't look at that.
Yeah,
it was really awesome of them.
Yeah,
I mean, and there is also like kind of this is something that I thought of while watching it, because you're right, it's basically two movies smashed together. Like, there is like our perspective, third person movie perspective, like the God camera, but then there's also the boots on the ground camera, because it's supposed to be a documentary. Like, they set up these talking heads with the lower thirds and the whole thing. Like, it's set as a documentary, but anybody who's ever worked on documentaries or anything like that, there's a story being told. Like, yes, they captured everything that was there, but there's also at the end of when you get all your footage, you still got to put a story together. So it's almost like the people making this documentary, it was going to be like, this would have been one of those Netflix expose, like scathing documentaries that everybody watched and went, holy crap, I can't believe that's what it's really like. So is the in-world camera crew responsible for our like bad view of Wickes in the beginning? Like, does he seem so like two-faced because they kept showing him in different lights? Like, they're, because you can tell like they're trying to build a story, because they interview all the same, I think it's like 8 or 9 people that they show at the end of the movie, they show at the beginning, and they're all like, I can't believe he did that, what a bastard, blah 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 blah. And then at the end of it, they're all saying, oh, nobody knows what happened to him, I hope he's okay, he's probably in a better place. Like, they all are, it's that documentary thing where they cut off at the incendiary part of the interview, and then they're going to bookend with like the rest of it later, but we just don't get the middle part of that, the middle part of that documentary, because they didn't show it to us. We got a movie in the middle of the documentary. So it's almost like they had two characters happening at the same time, the character that in world they're building, this character, and the movie's character that's there. Does that make sense?
So it would be like if Blair Witch had another story like interlaced into it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, there wasn't found footage.
Yeah.
Or have you guys seen the latest Paranormal Activity? I think it's like Kinship or whatever. They do this bit, but they do it better. Like, so you don't really notice when it's the God camera. It happens a few times, and they explain it away by saying that like they have a drone with them. They show it one time, they show the drone once, and they go, yep, we have a drone with us. And then now we're going to be able to have establishing shots for the rest of the movie, and we won't have to talk about it. But yeah, I think that movie is a good example of like how to show the characters when the cameras are off and when the cameras are on, and not have the audience feel confused. But this, because it was like the beginning of a documentary, when you start the film, it's very confusing in the middle after the attack, or after he's like infected, where he's just completely changed, or like the view, the meta view of the film is completely different.
I wonder, because so here's something, the whole movie is uncomfortable, right? You're uncomfortable the whole time. When they're like, when he's running around being crazy and is like breaking down doors, you're seeing how they live, they're liking cat food, everything's chaotic. Right up until the end, when there's like a dual, like you're feeling like, you're like, good, he needed to get sprayed in the face with that shit. And then also you're like feeling badly, like, oh, the wife, all of that, like you're uncomfortable the whole movie. I wonder if that sort of is actually consistent with that, is like, is this a documentary? This is uncomfortable. This is like kind of difficult to watch. I wonder if maybe it's just part of the aesthetic of the entire movie.
Yeah,
could be that the through line they were going for to try to link the two sort of separate projects together, for sure.
It's just, we're gonna be uncomfy, and that's just how it is.
But they do in some of the later beginning, if that makes any sense, like some of the later of the latter parts of the first third of the movie, especially when they start to actually raid the shack that Christopher and his son are in. That's when they really start putting in shots that are, as Ryan says, the God camera, the stuff that's clearly not documentary. And particularly it's when they start bleeding in like shots of Christopher himself sneaking around the shack that clearly documentary cameras were not capturing.
right.
And that's when it started to get a little confusing to me. I really do think that it's hard to make any kind of decision or analysis about the presentation of the movie because of the presentation of the movie. I do feel like it was two separate creators adding both of their very powerful voices into it, one being the originator and the other being essentially the money and the clout. And
Right.
I don't necessarily think that detracts from the movie, but it just makes it more difficult to analyze it.
Yeah. Well, it does. Like, you have the perception you have of the MNU and kind of the mood of the people. One thing we didn't really talk about at the very beginning of the movie, they also interview some people like in the community. Like, I think they interview. I don't know that it's a South African woman that they interview, but they are building the narrative of the other alien bad causing crime. They're like, to worry about them stealing your sneakers, I think is one of the lines they mentioned. So they're kind of talking about that. And then you kind of changes, like you said, in the middle. But maybe to slightly change a little bit of subject, I have a question about Wickus. Is he says later he didn't know about the medical experiments. That's bullshit. No?
Probably, yeah.
Right?
I felt like he really didn't, because when he went down there, he was confused.
He was
And
like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Yeah, because I think he knows that that on the street they kill them with impunity. I think he gets that because he kept calling them cowboys, and they shoot first, ask questions later. He repeated that line a few times. So I think he knows that, like, if I bring the military, the militarized security with me, they're going to shoot people. So I got to be careful and try to, like, do my bureaucratic thing. I think he knows that, like, basically they're concentration camps and they're much smaller than even the shacks. I think he knows that they're demolishing the shacks because this is my, like, headcanon. They let the Nigerians in there so that the Nigerians could capture all of the weaponry and put it in one spot. And then once they had enough, then they were going to come in, bulldoze everything, and take all the weapons. So
Sort of
that's
like how the United
headcanon,
States uses ISIS and stuff like that.
What? No way. Not the United States. We never done anything bad. We only do good things.
Well, so
you're right. I'm sorry. My bad.
So
Well,
maybe he was
go ahead.
naive to it. Like, he knew it was a thing that was probably happening, but he didn't realize the scope of it.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like he knew there was more evil shit, but didn't know what the evil shit was.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think even when he's putting his hand in the gun and he's, like, going to shoot it, and they're, like, trying to see if I think even the shooting range, he's, like, kind of confused. It's hard to tell.
But his body's also, like,
I don't know, a little bad,
an alien
like,
at the same time. He's, like, completely disoriented.
But he does say,
somewhere
"I'll shoot
between,
a
like,
pig, I'll
bad
shoot a
writing,
pig."
bad acting.
Yeah.
He knows where he's going.
Right. He did notice that.
Now I gotta push back on what you just said there, because I actually think that what's his name, the guy that plays Vicus, did an incredible job. All of his lines were improvised.
Really?
What?
Yeah,
Really?
it's literally on the Wikipedia.
Holy shit! I had it open. I didn't see that part. I must have missed that.
Oh,
That's
wild.
Did any of you notice the lines you could draw to the toxicity of capitalism in there with Wickus's character when he was when he first got his promotion, and he's just working and working and working, and he was so ill. And he's like, yeah, I got black stuff coming. It was like, he didn't even notice how sick he was. He's like puking everywhere. He's shitting his pants. He's like, if I go to work and I shit my pants at work, I'm like, my day's over. He was like, no, I gotta keep going. And he was just, like, totally grinding through it. And it was like the toxic grind mentality that he had for, like, his position there. And not only that, but one thing about his character, he's totally the dude in a zombie movie that gets bitten and doesn't tell anybody, because that's like just what was happening to him.
So he goes to work with a bite mark and, like, wears, like, a long sleeve shirt to hide it.
Yeah.
What's it? Oh, nothing. No, nothing. I'm completely fine.
That's not an alien hand. No, I gotta go to work.
No,
Well,
it's just giant eczema.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned
Yeah.
the
like bleeding black, and they're like, you got a little something, and then never like if that happened at work, we'd be like, oh my god, did you see his nose is like bleeding the tattoo juice? Like, I don't know. That's not how we should like call someone or something.
But like depressingly at my work would be like, oh my god, he's bleeding out of his nose, but thank God he's here because I need him to work on this project for me.
You know,
Right.
yeah.
yeah.
So, but they were like, when I like at the beginning, I was like, there's so many things to unpack, and there's like the capitalism, there's the genocide, there's the disease, there's the apartheid. You know, like there's just so many things that we could look at this.
There's something I want your guys' opinion on, because it stuck out to me, and I always try to notice like this. One thing I thought was interesting is that they never referred to they only referred to the aliens as invaders. They touched a little bit on like we're spending too much money. I think that was like almost like not just like a throwaway line, but like they said it only once. They didn't really come back to it, but something that they came back to like 3 or 4 times. And I'm curious what you guys think about this. Is they kept saying, when you bring in the guns, you bring in the crime. They kept cutting back to that same one woman. They kept saying, when you bring in the guns, you bring in the crime. You bring in the guns, where there are guns, there are crime. There is crime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the one thing I thought was interesting, which this is, the lefty analysis, right, is
that sounds so.
They never talk about they never talk about why the guns are there or why the crime is there. Like they never talk about like what breeds the bringing of guns into the situation, because they don't need guns. They're trapped.
Right.
They are stuck in that place. They cannot get out. There shouldn't be crime there. Like, it doesn't make any sense unless there's such a lack of resources that even in a completely sectioned off part of the entire city where no one can go in and no one can come out, it's so resource lacked that they have to fight each other to eat tires or garbage or whatever
Right.
they end up just finding and stuff like that. And
Not to mention,
it's never talked about. Like, so I'm just curious, like, if you guys noticed that, what you thought about it.
I didn't mean to interrupt, and I apologize for that. I thought you were done. But like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, and not to mention, like, you bring up basically material conditions, right? Like, that's the whole question that the movie certainly doesn't actually answer. But you bring up like eating the tires, and another fucking thing is the Nigerians writ large eating alien parts. And I feel like that's almost like, I don't think the movie was trying to, because I don't think the movie had these questions in mind. It wasn't even trying to answer them. But you're asking like what kind of resources were brought into the area? You know, why would they even have the guns? You know, what was like that? It's like, obviously, like, it's not like all these like people there are living off alien flesh and then trading the guns for alien flesh. But I feel like it's almost like implied in the movie. It's very strange and just like all over the place.
Like, in watching this movie and knowing I was coming to talk about it, I did like a deep dive into like South African history as much as I could in internet sleuthing, right? And I came up with why England became so interested in South Africa, and that was for the diamonds and the gold that exists there, right? And you can draw a direct line with, why are they so interested in keeping these aliens segregated and right where they are? And that's the weapons. Like, you can draw, it's the same thing. It's not necessarily diamonds or gold, but it's their weapon capabilities. It's the way that they know how to build weapons, that they're able to extract that as a resource from them. So they need to keep them alive. They need to keep them. But they don't need to keep them happy. They don't need to keep them well. They just need to keep them.
Yeah, and on top of that too, and they don't really ever mention this, and they never really. I wonder. Well, I have 2 questions that I wonder beyond that is, do they perceive that they may need them beyond their weapons for a labor force within, South Africa, perhaps. And then the other side of things, when you were talking about, Ryan, with the crime aspect of it, and I think what you said too, Nat, is they don't. I feel like those ways of describing or mentioning, crime came with the other people that are brought in, is they don't even. It's like that's the way that they're using to other them in this sense too, and the movie doesn't even bring any solutions really to anything. Like, I feel like nothing is solved. Like, their solution is just to move them into crappier places to exploit them and let them die. They don't even consider helping them leave, right? That's never even presented as an option. I know that's a lot of two separate things, but that's kind of what I was thinking about it.
I don't know,
Yeah,
that Iron Man suit that was there, that was like catching the bullets, and then it was like right back. That was really rad. And then when
That was a great moment.
When he hucked a pig at that guy, it was just like, can we have in the sequel, like, are they gonna be like hucking donkeys? Are they gonna be like, I need to see more of that happening. I think is gonna be an awesome touch in the future. Whoever decided to put that in, I am happy for that decision.
I have
Depends on which parties in power in America at the time. They'd be hucking donkeys or hucking elephants.
I have a nitpick. I have a nitpick about powers, like some sort of power shown like that, because they show like all the guys are shooting the guns at the thing and the thing just stops it, and the bullets, they do the Neo, all the bullets stop in front, and then he's able to shoot him back, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Let's hope for the next 30 minutes you never do that again. Like that, but then it's literally taken down by just regular bullets.
Well,
just
okay.
regular bullets. They shoot him
pretty
a lot.
dumb.
I'm gonna back this up with what I noticed
Okay.
in the movie. I get into this movie. Okay, so if you know, like, the one controlling it when it catches the bullets is the son. That's the Michael guy's son, who he was like in control of it remotely, right?
Mhm.
And then when Wickus was taken down in it, he was still a half human. That was his first time even like using any of that technology. So that was him using that Iron Man suit. So if the son was using that Iron Man suit, I think would have been much more successful in using that to like in the combat sense. But it's still really cool that every time he was like, oh, there's a target, and it would just go, and then they would just like vaporize.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
I was shouting at my TV, just keep shooting. I would have just held my arms up and just spun around in a circle. I mean, he had 2 machine guns or whatever. They're lasers. He doesn't know what it does. Just keep firing and spin in a circle.
And one other thing,
whole new world has been opened to this man in so many ways.
Well, one thing that they do in the documentary part of this film is they demonize the alien as being like not intelligent, and I think there's one line where they refer to them as workers, that they don't think for themselves and they don't take command from others. But they have the most they came here on a spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
And they have weapons that they can't even use, and they're describing them as these like stupid people who have no intelligence.
They needed to be othered so that.
But remember,
right.
and Libby, you're absolutely right. Remember how we're first introduced to the aliens because humans had to cut through the metal in the thing, and they found all these aliens being like starved to death on their own ship. And now we have no idea what was actually happening on the ship. We only have the human perspective from it, right? We do not know if that was like a natural biological process. The humans just misunderstood. And that could have colored, apart from, South Africa's inherent racism, but like that could have colored like people's like initial ideas of what these things were like.
Yes, especially the 1982 through 1982 lens.
And this
Yeah,
was like 5 years prior to like all the like giant like battles for independence. Like this is like prior to Angola and all that, right? Like
Right.
what they're setting it up was obviously because this, I don't know if you guys don't know this or not. This didn't actually happen.
But I think it's a very fashy thing. I mean, that just kind of rang as like any politician that's ever tried to swindle me ever is the enemy is both weak and strong. Like,
Yes.
and you have to remember that. So now, are they this mindless, dumb thing that we have to take care of and coddle, or are they so dangerous that we have to move them away? Are they getting out of District 9 and causing fires and derailing trains, or are they so inept that you could throw cat food at them and they will just eat that and be content? Because why aren't you guys just dropping pallets of cat food in there every single day to just keep them there? Like, they both have to be a imminent threat, but also a burden at the same time. So that's how I
100%.
read that.
And you
Yeah.
can, and if District 10 is going to be worth its salt at all, and if say there's some sort of like liberation movement for them, right? You can run hopefully you can run a parallel between like propaganda against Black people like prior to the Civil War, where like they're like conniving and like impish and tricksy, if you will, and then as soon as like the like enslaved peoples are freed, quote unquote, under capitalism, but like all the propaganda switches to like they're lazy and they won't work for you well and all that. Like and if District 10 does any kind of research, we can maybe assume that they'll have something like that included in it,
And
Right.
to sort of piggyback on that idea, I wonder sort of their view. So like the South African racism is different than American racism. And that South African racism, you can look directly at it and they're like, yeah, no, this is what it is. It's right here on the paper. We have an outline that like, here's where you rank, here's where you rank, here's where you rank. In America, we don't have that. It's all very, oh no, you have to like prove that the racism even exists. Like the reason that like, Black schools aren't funded the same as white schools were because of, and like you
A
can only
total coincidence.
yeah, right.
A meritocracy, if
like,
you will.
Like you have to sort of sift out like this is what racism is. This is why it's systemic. This is what's happening, and you have to get people on board with it. Where in South Africa, they're all on board. They're like, yes, no, we're divided strictly by race. Your race is worth this much. Your race is worth this much, and you are brought down here because you're trying to do this, and like. So I wonder how maybe that'll be addressed in District 10. And if it is like Evan, like you said, it's like set in America. How are they going to draw the lines between like you were able in District 9 to draw all the lines between apartheid and the treatment of the aliens? How are they going to do it based in America?
Yeah.
I think if it's based in America, it would absolutely have to be undocumented immigrants as the allegory, because I feel like that's the closer one-to-one, because
like asylum.
because American apartheid was more subliminal. It like there were things that were in your face. We had Jim Crow, we had black codes. There were things that were definitely right in your face, but we also became post-racial before South Africa. So we also had a chance to be like, ooh, they're doing the wrong thing. And it's like, no.
The civil rights movement happened.
Yeah, we're just we're just doing it. Your president said that apartheid was a good thing a couple years ago. You don't remember that part, but I'm sorry. Everything bad that's happened in America is Reagan's fault, and I will die on that hill.
I'll be right next to you.
But I think in a 2024-2025 District 10 movie, it would be, I think the one-to-one would probably be undocumented immigrants for in the US if it was like set here.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Agreed. But yeah, so I guess we've I feel like we could spend another hour probably talking about this movie, but I wondered if anyone has any last thing, any questions that we maybe didn't raise that we should touch on, or any specific thoughts you might have before we oh, you do have one now.
I have one thing, right? And I think that
Okay.
the essence of this entire movie can be boiled down to one thing, and that it's the story of a man who has a phone that the charge of which lasts for 50 plus hours.
Those
This
old
was
flip phones were the shit
2009.
though.
Right? Like it's just a little Nokia brick.
Yes, this was Nokia time, and there was no games being played on the phone.
Except
Oh,
Snake.
no way. He definitely
Yeah.
had Centipede on that thing.
Did you all notice that when he like had escaped and he went into the schnitzel place, he was like, "You are legally obligated to serve me." Like, did
Very
you
white.
notice that he said that? And
Yeah.
Did
that was
notice that, and I was like, wait a second, is apartheid happening at the same time as this? Whoa, hold on. South Africa, you guys are doing too much.
Double apartheid.
And
Yeah,
when,
you can't.
when he first gets that can of cat food, when he's like, he's so hungry, like they didn't serve him at the schnitzel place or whatever, and he's so hungry and he eats the cat food. You can see him go, "Oh fuck yeah, oh I'm eating cat food." Like you could see he was eating it. He's like, "I'm still half human, I'm half alien, and this is amazing." Like you could see the dichotomy there. And I was trying to think of a puncher for that all day, and I didn't come up with one.
Well, it's
But-
funny you mentioned that because the cat food thing and the fact that the main good guy character scientist name is Christopher Johnson are like the two complaints that I had about like whether or not this movie did a good enough job humanizing the aliens, because like Christopher Johnson is like a pretty white sounding Anglo name.
Yeah, they gave him that name.
If they named him like Vugger or something like that, and then still gave him the same respect, like that would have been much better.
Yeah.
And the
Right,
cat food
yeah.
thing is just sort of, I don't want to say it's not infantilizing, it's almost like animalizing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's like a
Right.
trope, the same way that they do like racial tropes in the food that they assign to different races and eating too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one thing that I thought was interesting, because I actually, for my honeymoon I went to South Africa, and we were in Johannesburg and Cape Town, and we camped along it was like a trip through from Durban to Cape Town, and we camped the whole way. So we drove through all these townships that looked just like this. It was really eerie after like having this like realization that like, oh man, this movie was very accurate with the way that they look. And like District 9 looks like townships that are right outside of Johannesburg. Like you
Wow.
drive a few minutes outside the city and that's where people live. And
Jeez.
I remember driving past those things, and like the guide was like, you know, this is remnants of apartheid. People still live here. This is like, the government doesn't help these townships. Like they try their hardest. Like they have well water that they have to walk to. It's like it's a whole thing. But there was a few little South African details that I noticed in here. Black people now in South Africa don't speak Afrikaans. Like, did you guys notice? I don't know if you watched with subtitles. I watched with
Yeah.
subtitles.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it showed a few white characters and they were speaking Afrikaans. And every time they showed any black character, if they spoke a different language, it was one of the other 19 in the country. They have 19 official languages. Isn't that fun? But it was like one of the other languages every single time. And I thought that was really interesting, because a couple of the times when like the white guards or like the militia guys are like arguing or fighting or whatever, they speak Afrikaans to each other, to like naturally it just came out like they were in distress, so they just shouted something. And I thought that was really kind of I don't know if they did it on purpose. It could have been on purpose. Like this whole movie feels very political, but I noticed that like a lot, that I was almost like curious if they were gonna try to make the aliens do that, or something like that, and like try to make them speak. But they did shout Hosa because they were like they kept referring to what they how the alien language as clicks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was also like very like noticeable to me. Like I picked it up right away as soon as they were like all those clicks. Is he clicking at me? And it's like, oh
Very
man,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
Not to mention
gross.
that the aliens. I don't know if you would call it code switching, but they definitely use English words. Like if you listen really closely, you can hear Christopher use English words. I forget which one he says, but it's when he's telling Vicus that it's going to be 3 years. Like he uses,
Oh
he uses at least one English word, and that's not the only example, and I can't remember the other one.
Huh. I didn't notice that.
I thought
I mean, they do a great job burying it in there. You have to listen to it, and I don't think that counts as code switching, but it's close.
Yeah, I thought I was hallucinating that because I was reading the subtitle as I was listening to it, but he definitely he says I'm sorry, it sounded like you said 3 years, and then he looks up and he says 3. And then whatever the word for years is, he says that like in his language, but he definitely it's
I
like
didn't
the
even
word,
notice that one.
Yeah, like he looks up and says 3 at him because they're both saying it like at the same time, and I was like, did I just mishear that, or he's talking to him,
the
right?
sound, I'm a hearing aids wearer, and so if there's sounds, a lot of times I miss sounds in movies, and I have to rely on the subtitles. I didn't get to hear that part.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting little layer, I think, to it. I don't know how meaningful it is, but it is there.
But clearly it was an intentional. Whether what the intent was, I think, is probably less obvious.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think I don't have any other real notes on the movie. I know I already asked if anyone has any last thoughts, but last final thoughts. Anyone?
So Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon.
Yes.
This movie, you can listen to the white stripes slowly turning into you and watch this movie, and it does the same sort of thing.
Hell yeah.
Cool.
I hadn't thought about that Pink Floyd thing in ages.
There was
I didn't realize that.
Ryan, did you have anything
Not
else you wanted to
but
add?
the song reminds me.
No, nothing. Nothing I can think of. Still a really good movie. I still love this movie a lot, even though I can nitpick it to death.
Yeah, there was one thing I just wanted to add. There was a really good shot of an alien being evicted as they had their shopping cart full of things. And I thought that was particularly powerful because I'm sure we've all seen people on just the sidewalk with the shopping cart full of things, probably as they've been evicted from whatever bridge they were living under, from like U.S. police or something like that. And whether that was intentional or not, I thought that was a very good sort of one-to-one for a lot of what we're seeing today.
Yeah. They definitely, and well, actually, it's interesting you mentioned that because this movie, I don't know when they filmed it exactly, but it was right after like the United States, like the housing crash too. So I didn't mention that at all kind of at the beginning, but I think it does play into how you view others. I feel like that was also a heightened thing of these people are coming to our country and they are, they're the ones that causing the problems, not actually capitalism and finance and all the other actual problems. So I don't know. Just thought that would be there too. Cool. Awesome. Well, Nat and Ryan and Leftist Libby, thank you all for coming on and talking about this film.
Of course.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, as always, you can listen to the podcast on your streaming platform of choice, and have a good one.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks.